Fragments Derelict. The first 3 years of my life were in Tijuana, which is the bordering town to San Diego. We crossed over because my parents wanted us to get a better education, have the opportunities, really try to live the American dream. And we did for a while. I always say like one of the hinge moments in my life is our house was foreclosed when I was 14. And so that really it awakened me to sort of new struggles that previously my parents were able to like hide from me. My parents were undocumented for a very long time. It's another fear that I had to sort of share that, to like keep that close to the chest. I was a big fan of watching Deaf Poetry on HBO. Most Def hosted the show, and a lot of poets would go on there and sort of perform their art. Some people would read, right, but they still have their performance. And I didn't know it then, but that was really one of the strongest moments of representation as a person of color that I had ever experienced. And that sort of like inspired me to start writing. The first poem I ever wrote was, it was in elementary school, right? But I didn't count that because I don't have it and I don't really remember it. But the first poem I wrote in high school, I was 14, it was for my girlfriend at the time. It was a Valentine's Day poem. Can't get more cliche than that, when it comes to love poetry. But it really became an outlet for me to sort of express the emotions that I had inside. I didn't know it then, but masculinity is very, it's cage and sometimes, and it can be really hard to express your emotions, especially when you're around, jocks all the time as a basketball player, right? So for me, it was an outlet to really express the emotions I had and that I couldn't really share. Even though I did share, to my friends and whatnot, you still didn't share everything, right? And that's where I took to the page to sort of escape.
Graduate of need. How many times do you want to be like Dustin, asking for directions, questions, time, eating every second? You were desperate to bust up the ceremony, bust in to bust vows, eloping crazy through a small town, bust back into what was. How many times did you want that magic bus ride back to us, back to people staring at your couple pics on a cruise ship, screaming out cuteness? How many times did you want to be like Dustin, have people call you Dustin, to be like Dustin from The Graduate, to show your love like Dustin? Won't it be something to be like Dustin? Won't it be something to be like Dustin? Running sloppy into that place that shines, to be like Dustin, using symbols to fight reality off. How many times, Dustin, did you wonder what's next after you'd break up a wedding? Wonder how you only got so far standing on her doorstep saying you'd fight for a dream like Dustin? Bust back in to save us from being nothing. Bust back in to save us from being nothing. To keep a promise, as if I were Dustin. Sometimes I start with a memory or an idea. I write about love in every aspect that I can think of. Whether that's romantic, familial, whatever, loss, joy, not too much joy. That's just not the direction I go as a writer. But sometimes I start with an idea, like, last year I was in an actual workshop of poetry as a graduate student. I could do that sometimes. And so I had an idea about writing a poem about my aunt who passed away from cancer. And I had an idea, and that's where it started. And I started to like craft the language about the idea. What are the memories that I can insert into the poem? How can I have that reader identify sort of what I was going through, the pain I was feeling, the loss that I was feeling. Poetry is like a test almost of what kind of language you can introduce and sort of challenge yourself to say things differently, to flip the syntax, to create rhymes out of, near rhymes, to place rhymes in different places. I'm all about music. So I try to combine that music of English and Spanish within my poetry in ways that really highlight sonics. So that's really important to me. And so I try to find the words that can really push those sounds forward, When I was in my MFA, one of the biggest struggles I had was how do I take the stage onto the page
and the page onto the stage, right? And so there's this dynamic where we write for the page, it'll read differently. The way you read it, the way I read it, the way others will read it. And when I read my poetry, no one knew how to read it in my voice. And so how do I sort of maneuver punctuation and words to really emulate my style? When I have readings, I tell people it's not going to be your average reading. You know, you're not going to be, it's not something you're going to be used to, and that changes depending on the space. So like here, we're at a predominantly white institution, Ohio State. And so readings are going to be really different in regards to MFA programs. Even when I was at San Diego State, they were still sort of following that sort of, people say poetry voice, where it's like really soft and, not really about emoting. But I'm like, no, I want to emote and I want people to emote back. I want it to be like a concert, like a show. You feel the pain that I'm trying to bring to you. Right. And so I don't like when people are polite. I try to capture performance through my poetry and music. I'm also a drummer, and so I really like to hear music when people are reading their poetry.
Nostalgia opens fire in Tijuana. She didn't know that chile from a candy rubs over the bare of her lips, or how still I pout for that tamarindo spice, that inhale, that bite, that linger. Hot shifts the eyes, the laundromat into a fight. Her hot sweat in this heat, arcade blaring teens, Hadouken, Shoryuken. Ryu Guru killing vessels at the local Landro beat. Across the street, fruteria, fresh raspados on a Sunday just before closing. Besos a fumble, dame dos chamangos, por favor, con todo. Chacachacas, cacahuates, chamoy, chamoy. She said, dame tu chacachacas, gacho no eres. Of course I gave them up, because it was. And these are the boulevards like prayers we traverse. Foolish letters to the wind. Lord, I don't believe in mercy.
There's this thing called Spanglish, right? That we use as Latinx people. Or it happens organically. You just switch from either one. But I'm not trying to do that in my book. What I'm trying to do is, strategically find the sonics that can be melded together, and that it's not forced. Not to say that Spanglish is forced, but there are moments when poets who are Latinx try to bring Spanish into their work, and it does sound forced. What I mean by that is not natural to the rhythms that are happening in the book, or in that phrase, or in that poem. So I really made it a point to make it as natural as possible to switch from English to Spanish, so that I'm immersing you in the sounds of my everyday. It's been my dream since I was a young kid to have a book of poetry and to be studied. That's huge. To be a Latinx person and to one day see students reading your book, that's something powerful for me. I used to want to be studied because I wanted to be complicated and be like, Emily Dickinson and, abstract and whatnot. And just hidden meanings. But then I was like, no, I want to be people to read it and be like, I get it. So that's where it started, and sort of now it's coming out this month, and I'm gonna have a debut reading, and it's been a journey, but one really full of hard work and sort of interrogating what love means, and constantly going back into that mindset of okay, this is what I was feeling. How can I capture that? But the book is a love story. I always call it's like a novela, short novela broken into poems, right? And it's loosely chronological. And so you follow the journey of Kid Heartbreak and this relationship that I consider her as this apparition that haunts the speaker and doesn't allow the speaker to move forward. Part of the book too also is trying to explore that vulnerability as a man, to write about something so painful and so opening in regards to the perspectives and sort of the pain that you're feeling. And I wanted to make that palpable for the reader. One of the best pieces of advice I've gotten from authors, from an author, David Tomas Martinez. He was signing a book. He did a reading. He was signing my book for me, and I was telling him how excited I was for him, to see a Latinx author have success like he was. And he said, no one's going to write this shit for you. And I took that to heart. No one's going to do what you want to do for you, right? No one's going to do the work for you. No one's going to write that. No one's going to interrogate those feelings for you to come out the other side and write that project.